If the Denver Broncos are going to improve to 5-3 on the season, they must take care of business at home against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. We'll highlight what they need to do just that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. For all your Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, more, this is your daily go-to. Should be your daily go-to. So make yourself an everyday listener, and thanks for making us your first listen, Broncos Country, every single day. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. And look, Broncos Country, it's a big week here for Denver. They have a chance to go to 5-3 on the season if they can take care of business at home against the Carolina Panthers. Here's what you can expect on today's episode of the show. We'll wrap things up by diving into our keys to victory and why the Broncos must take care of business at home against a team that they should. We'll even highlight players to watch, why Jaleel McLaughlin could be a breakout player in Sunday's game against one of the NFL's worst run defenses this season. We'll kick things off, though, with the Broncos' focus really coming into this week. Obviously, coming off the victory against the Saints on Thursday Night Football last week, now you face the Carolina Panthers, who 1-6, really at the bottom of the NFL right now. And there's been a lot of conversation about, hey, this is one of those games you can't overlook. I think the same thing was said for Denver against the Saints with all the injuries. You can't overlook New Orleans. And I know the fan base has echoed some sentiments that, hey, this is a young football team. Are they overlooking the Carolina Panthers? I can tell you this, players are not overlooking Carolina. And look, that's an emphasis that Sean Payton has had really on a week-to-week basis. Regardless of the opponent, Sean wants the Broncos, he wants the players in the locker room to understand the focus of, hey, we have to focus on ourselves. Our focus is inwards. We have to understand what we have to improve on, where we can continue to sharpen and get better. But more importantly, it's knowing what we need to do and aligning that against whoever the opponent is that they're facing that week and understanding, hey, you have to accomplish these things if you want to win. The NFL truly is an any given Sunday type of league. And while a lot of people are already going out there and saying, hey, instant win for the Broncos, the locker room, the players, they're not doing that. They understand the danger of overlooking a team. And I would say in past years, Broncos Country, we have seen, I'd say maybe in the last 6-7 years, there have been games that Denver should go into a game and blow out and obviously win. And we've seen it be a struggle for them to do that. So this is one of those games where you want to see Denver come out and blow out the Carolina Panthers. But as you know, you're going to get everyone's best on Sundays. I'd say, obviously, with Bryce Young starting at quarterback for them, he's in a position right now. Obviously, the franchise in Carolina, they're in a rough spot with how they're being operated from the ownership level down. It's hard for a coach like Dave Canales to be able to do what he wants to do when you have a power-hungry owner running things. But for a guy like Bryce Young, he's got an opportunity here. You get to go against one of the NFL's best defenses. You get to go against one of the NFL's best secondaries. And now it kind of puts a chip on his shoulder where he could come out here and if he lights it up, well, all of a sudden it might change the conversation. There might be some teams that call and inquire about him. So for Bryce Young, this is a big game. And for the Broncos, this is a big game because, hey, you need as many wins as possible because the schedule is going to get tougher. We already know, hey, Baltimore next week, Kansas City the week after, you come back home against the Atlanta Falcons. That's a tough 3-game stretch right there. But your focus has to be on the present moment. So I'd say the Broncos vibe in the locker room, they are not overlooking the Carolina Panthers. They know it's any given Sunday. And here's exactly what Jonathan Cooper told us about the team's focus going into this week.
It's just getting back to work. It's any given Sunday for a reason. And all these teams are NFL teams with NFL caliber players and everybody gets paid. And that means you have to bring your A game every single Sunday. It doesn't matter who's the opponent. You have to get back to work. You have to work hard and really just put your best foot forward no matter what's going on or who's out there. So I know our team is going to focus up and do that.
It's control the controllables. And look, Cooper is spot on. I would say my vibe I've gotten from this locker room, this is a young locker room, but they're a mature locker room. I think they're all business first. And I think the team culture inside has changed drastically in the last year and a half. Obviously, since I have been able to see Sean Payton come in, start to implement what he's wanted to do, but now you're getting these guys to carry out that vision, like guys like Jonathan Cooper, guys emerging like Nick Bonito, Pat Surtain. You have a lot of new voices in the building that are speaking up that weren't necessarily the guys that would speak up in the locker room, so to speak, in the last couple of years. So I think it just kind of trickles down. There is a good level of focus. I think the Broncos have had a great realm of preparation here this week, and now you just have to go out there and take care of business against a Carolina Panthers team that really at this point has nothing to lose. Their backs are against the wall. They're underdogs in a big-time way. You just got to go take care of business. That'll be the subject and really the focus of the Broncos this week. And I think even going forward, 1 week at a time is the approach that you have to take. And I would say this about Carolina too. Obviously, Mike Kay, I worked with him at Pro Football Network. He's a beat reporter over there in Carolina. There's just a lot of different storylines with this team that I think are interesting going into this matchup specifically. Okay, hey, defensively, you're banged up. You got some injuries. Former Bronco Josie Jewell, limited participant in practice this week, has been dealing with a hamstring injury that's really kept him out of action for a handful of games. And now he's got an opportunity to come out and play. Of course, like Josie, it's not bad blood. Josie loved Denver. Josie just chose to go elsewhere where, hey, he was going to get a contract. He was going to get paid well. But for him to come back home, that's certainly a storyline there. And I know Broncos fans will probably cheer for him a little bit. Josie was a fan favorite for a lot of people. But you have to come into this game in the mindset saying, hey, we are in control of our own destiny at this point. The road for the AFC gets tougher. The Chiefs right now are undefeated in the division. You're a few games back from them, but you need to stack some wins here. And I think the promising development is in your 3 losses, you have lost by 1 score or less. The problematic thing, though, that Denver has to overcome is getting off to a faster start at home. They're 1-2 in home games this season, and they haven't gotten off to a fast start, I would say, in either of the home games that they've played in. Certainly against the Raiders, they were down 10-0. That could have been 10-3. It could have been 17-3. The Raiders are knocking on the door. Pat Surtain's interception changes the landscape of that game, and then Denver runs away with it in the second half. They get off to a massively slow start against the Los Angeles Chargers a few weeks ago. You go into a 20-0 halftime deficit. Certainly not what you need there. You couldn't get off to a fast start against the Steelers in week 2, so find a way to get off to a fast start against a team that you absolutely should here this week. That'll be key here for the Broncos. But who are some players that we have our eyes on against the Panthers this week in a matchup where, hey, it's a non-conference thing. It's not going to help you in terms of your conference record and tiebreakers, but wins are important in the National Football League. Who are some players that could break out? Well, Jaleel McLaughlin is one we're going to highlight, and a few others here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports done the right way, because Prize Picks, they are the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action, where you can join over 10 million users and sign up today. Prize Picks, they also invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect, and you can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So check it out today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's show was brought to you by Pre-Alcohol by Z-Biotics. And Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink by Z-Biotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-Alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how you can use it effectively. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off. Who are some of the key players to watch in Sunday's matchup at home? The Denver Broncos, 4-3, hosting the Carolina Panthers, who are 1-6. 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff on CBS. One of the things I think we can highlight here, Broncos Country, and real quick, just want to say thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. We bring you daily Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. I'm at practices every day, and we love to be able to connect with the audience. So thank you for making us your first listen. Thanks for engaging with us. You make the show exactly what it is. I think one of the key points we want to make, obviously, going into these players to watch scenarios here, every week it's trying to identify, okay, hey, where is a Broncos strength in terms of player, in terms of a matchup that maybe you can take advantage of against the opponent. And I think it changes on a week-to-week basis, right? Because I think every week we can be cliche and say, hey, player to watch this week is Bo Nix. How does he do with his footwork this week in the passing game? That would have been too easy of a one. But I think that when you look at the trends, okay, how can Denver maybe get off to a fast start at home, but more importantly, who can be players that can change the landscape of this game, and who do you think is going to have a big game? I think for me personally, let's start off here with Jaleel McLaughlin, the Broncos change of pace running back. He almost broke one against the New Orleans Saints. This is a game where I feel like the Broncos have an opportunity to really run the football effectively well, right? They're playing one of the worst ranked defenses right now against the run in Carolina. I think they're dead last, if I'm not mistaken. They're a 32nd run D right now because the Panthers defense, they're allowing over 162 yards rushing on the ground on a weekly basis. That's their season average. Denver coming off of a game where they ran for 227 yards. Obviously, with some designs by Bo Nix, Javonte Williams having a big game on the ground, and Jaleel McLaughlin nearly breaking one on Thursday Night Football here. I have a feeling that this week against Carolina will be the Jaleel McLaughlin breakout week. Obviously, the change of pace is going to be something to watch, but I think with his vision, and that's something I've been so impressed with this season. You go back and you watch the film reviews I've been doing offensively over there at Mile High Sports on their YouTube channel. You can see specifically when Javonte touches the ball, he's gotten better at hitting the hole and finding it. Jaleel McLaughlin is very decisive, especially when he's on outside runs. He knows where he can cut inside, and then he has got the ability to change direction and pivot back to the outside. His vision is very good, and I have a feeling just watching the film this week, looking at how the Panthers have played, especially against the Washington Commanders last week when they got walloped on the road there, even a game where Jaden Daniels left with an injury, Marcus Mariota took over. This is an opportunity for the Broncos to really run the ball effectively well, and I think they'll capitalize on passing opportunities that open up. But Jaleel McLaughlin, breakout week for him this week. I think not only just as a runner, but I think as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I not to get into bold predictions here, but I think we will see at least a 45-yard run here from Jaleel this week, and we can always come back and revisit that. But I think he's also going to catch a pass out of the backfield where he's going to get at least 15, 16 yards. This is the type of week where I think Javonte is going to be the workhorse, but Jaleel is going to be the guy that's going to explode and capitalize there and create more opportunities for Denver's offense to sustain and extend drives or even big scoring drives, something along those lines. So Jaleel is one of my players that I have to watch here. Also thinking about your Broncos Country, if you want to send in yours, make sure you let us know on social media who you have your eye on this week. Jaleel is one. I'm going to shift gears now to the defensive side of the ball here. And I think that Nik Bonitto is going to be one of the players I have my eyes on here. And look, I think you look at the trend for him this season, he didn't even start the year as the starter, but he did work his way into, obviously with Baron Browning's injury, worked his way into the starting lineup. And really, with how he's playing right now, I don't think he's going to give that up because he's had a sack in each of the last 5 games, has a chance now to make that potentially 6 games in a row. The Panthers in this situation, you look at them overall in terms of sacks allowed, they haven't allowed as many, right? They're actually in the top 10, and I think they're 9th in the NFL in terms of sacks allowed, but a lot of that has been predicated on them running the football with Chuba Hubbard and company, but also getting the ball out of their hands quickly. Andy Dalton there. So for Nik Bonitto, I think he'll draw some assignments against Ike Mekwonu or Icky. Obviously, he was one of the top offensive tackles a couple of years ago in the NFL draft. That's going to be a matchup assignment I'm going to watch. But the thing with Bonillo is his bend has been incredible. He not only has he displayed more power in his rush this year, he's still maintaining the athleticism and the speed off of the edge. And he's able to bend and duck and dip and dive. He's doing all these things that, would equate to him having a role in the next dodgeball movie. But he's been able to get after quarterbacks. Can he make it 6 straight games with a sack? I have my eye on him. And we actually had a chance to catch up with Nick inside the Broncos locker room this week here at practice. And one of the things he talked about in terms of quarterback, whether it's Bryce Young, he's a smaller guy. He said, but, you got to try to find a way to cage players like that because they can use their legs and do a little bit of damage on the ground.
Really just, at least for us up front, just try to cage him, make it really dark for him. We know he's a shorter guy, so we want to, kind of keep him in that pocket, make sure he can't see and stuff like that. So.
And look, his counterpart opposite him, Jonathan Cooper, has also had a very impressive season to boot as well. Those two guys could very well be the starting duo next year in Denver. They're starting duo right now. They've got some good momentum. Obviously, Jonathan Cooper in a contract year. Cooper also talked about the importance of pressuring a quarterback and really trying to take the confidence away for a young guy in Bryce Young, whose confidence has already been shot, not because of how he's performed. That's been part of it, but with how he's been utilized and all of a sudden how quickly the organization made the switch to go from him to Andy Dalton, who's obviously not going to play or not start in this week's game. It is going to be Bryce. But how can you find a way to wreck the confidence of a young quarterback? That's the goal. And it's not just for Bryce Young. Jonathan Cooper says it's for every quarterback that the team plays.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I feel like that's against a lot of quarterbacks in this league. If you mess with their confidence and you mess with them and you like I said, you get them out their rhythm, you hit them a couple times, you touch them, you make them feel uncomfortable, make sure they don't have any time back there. It can mess with anybody. So, just definitely going to be doing that this week as well.
And we'll see. That's going to be the goal for the Broncos this week. Sean Payton, one of the things he mentioned to us in his Wednesday press conference earlier in the week was you have to find a way to disrupt the quarterback. You have to find a way to disrupt the pocket. The Broncos defense, they're doing that right now at a high rate, and that must continue throughout the rest of the season if they're going to find a way to go on a run and surpass last year's win total and have a chance at the AFC playoff picture. The game, the schedule, it just gets more crucial for them. And I think the players realize what's at stake and they're focused. And I think that's a good thing about the sign and the mentality of this team. Another player we're going to keep our eye on here. It's going to go back to the offensive side of the ball. Courtland Sutton, right? 0 targets against the New Orleans Saints. And a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, what does this mean for Courtland? I think people are reading too much into it. Courtland is the guy, and Sean Payton even told us as well, is that your first play of the game, that was a designed shot to go deep down to Courtland Sutton. But because they had Marshawn Lattimore playing tight underneath on the hip and they had Tyrann Mathieu over the top, then obviously they had to pivot away from that specific play. And then they ended up seeing a little bit more zone coverage as the game progressed. But Sean Payton said, hey, the goal is to still try to get Courtland the ball. He's a weapon. He's a target for him. But even though that Courtland didn't have any targets in that game officially, I love the effort that he displayed in terms of being a blocker and being active in the run game. And after the game, I mean, he wasn't pouting on the field just because he wasn't getting targeted. He wasn't pouting. Like, that's the type of guy that Courtland is. He's a captain. And I think that there's this misconception I've seen a lot of fans say is that, well, Courtland's a diva. Courtland's never exemplified any behavior that makes him a diva. And I think the game where he got 0 targets this past week and how he played, how excited he was when his teammates, when other receivers caught a pass, and when the run game got in and they got in the end zone, Courtland was one of the first guys there to celebrate. Courtland's the ultimate team guy, and I think that the Broncos are going to find a way this week to try to go out there, force feed him, get him some big play opportunities against the Carolina Panthers defense that is struggling, but find a way to get the offensive rhythm going and in place. Courtland is our player to watch. So to highlight here, Broncos Country, we've got our eyes on Jaleel McLaughlin having a potential breakout game for the Broncos this week. Nick Bonitto looking for his 6th game in a row where he registers a sack, and then Courtland Sutton having a big game after having 0 targets on Thursday Night Football. Make sure you let us know your picks as to who you have your eye on, players to watch in Sunday's game against the Carolina Panthers. But how are the Broncos going to protect the home field advantage, right? Protect home and come away with a win against the Panthers to improve to 5-3 on the year? We'll get into our keys to victory here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, at Broncos Country, FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook, and they want to get you involved with a big return here this season. Look, to open up this week, the Denver Broncos, the line earlier was 7.5-point favorites at home against Carolina. That has now moved to 9.5-point favorites against the Panthers here on Sunday. And if you believe in that, you can take the Broncos on the money line. If you believe the Panthers could cover, well, you could even do that as well inside of the FanDuel Sportsbook app. But when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same place where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 and bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I'm going to throw $5 this week on the Broncos on the money line, the New Orleans Saints to cover against the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm taking the Bills on the money line against the Seattle Seahawks. And of course, the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to take them, and I'm going to take the over 41.5 points in that AFC West matchup this week as part of one of my parlays on FanDuel Sportsbooks. Check it out. Get started today over there at FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, I want to say thanks once again to everyone in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen for all things that you need to know surrounding your favorite team here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Keys to victory. I mean, we always dive into it every single week. Run the ball effectively, be efficient in the pass game. Don't turn the football over. Like, those are obvious cliche answers, but it's not the what, it's the how, and it's the why. It's the rhyme and the reason behind everything. And I think we're going to dive deep into that here to wrap up today's episode of the show. I think first and foremost, coming out here saying for the Broncos offensively, have a balanced offensive approach. I think that Denver should come into this game trying to run the ball, get that going, and then take some shots in the passing game there, but just find some rhythm in it. You know, Denver has been, I think, in the first half of a lot of these games, they've come up and they've been a little bit pass happy. Like, there'll be examples where Bo Nix will have 16 dropbacks in the first half. They'll have 10 rushing attempts. But I would like to see it leaning a little bit more towards running the ball and then capitalizing on your shots in the passing game here. The Panthers right now, when you look at them statistically this season, they are dead last against the run, allowing over 160 yards on the ground. That's why we talked about Jaleel McLaughlin. But for Denver to come off of a 227-yard rushing performance with a combination of guys like Bo Nix, Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin getting involved, want to see a little bit more of that. Can we see a little bit more of Audric Estime in the run game this week after he had the fumble? I asked Broncos head coach Sean Payton earlier in the week on how do you continue to nurture his development while continuing to emphasize ball security. And he mentioned that Javonte Williams is going to have Audric walk around the facility. He's going to walk around with the football. But he says that he's got to have to earn the idea that, because teams now know, like, hey, he's got a tendency to fumble. Teams are going to try to rip the football out anytime he's in the game. But he says he's going to have to earn that the right to be able to change that narrative about him. And Sean Payton said that he believes that he will. So could we see the full three-headed rushing attack here? I think it starts, you can see that happen if you have a balanced offensive approach here. Carolina right now, I mean, when you look at them in total defense, net yards allowed per game, they are 30th in the NFL. They're allowing over 385 yards in totality. This is an opportunity for Denver. Look, Denver played one of the dead last ranked defenses in the Saints last week. Now you have to do that with the second to dead last defense in the NFL with Carolina. Find a way to get that balance going. And look, I think not trying to be too cute or creative this week offensively is going to be the key. We want to see the short to intermediate passing game, an area Bo Nix told us this week when he met with us. He sees that as an area where the team is growing. And look, you're getting contributions from guys like Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, Lucas Kroll. And now if you can get Courtland Sutton involved this week in terms of the passing game, things can open up. But I think that there's going to be a little bit of an emphasis here on shorter routes. Like, we're talking slants. Like, we've seen that in the last couple of weeks. But obviously, there are going to be designed shots based on coverage and situation. Denver's going to try to find and identify that as the flow of the game goes on. But offensive balance is going to be key here for Bo Nix, Sean Payton, and the Denver offense. Defensively, I think the number one key here, disrupt Bryce Young, right? One of the keys Sean talked about, disrupt the pocket or disrupt the quarterback. Bryce is a guy who is athletic, can get outside the pocket and scramble, extend plays with his legs. Scramble drill will definitely be a factor for him, but you have to maintain your edge discipline that you have had so far this season. Denver is going to dial up pressure. So understand that, hey, Bryce Young, a guy who's trying to revitalize his career after being benched, is going to try to take some quick fire, aggressive shots here. Now, when Denver does that, they have to get home and they have to be calculated. I like Denver's coverage guys that they have, obviously, with the return of Patrick Surtain this week. There's going to be Deontay Johnson you have to account for there, Xavier Legette. And then obviously their tight end is one of their bigger contributors, their third leading receiver, I think, is Jatavian Sanders. And then you have to stop the run game there, obviously, with Chuba Hubbard and company there. But the Panthers this season, and we talked about it earlier, they are ranked in the top 10 offensively in one category, and that's they've only allowed 14 total sacks this year. Denver, and by comparison, is tied for first in sacks allowed, with only allowing 9 sacks on the year offensively. So a lot of that is relative due to the quick pass game. So I think we're going to see a little bit more press coverage here from Denver, some aggressive man-to-man coverage looks while also dialing up the blitz there, and then just being able to use your leverage, get in position, and make plays. I think that'll be an emphasis for the Broncos this season. Now, while the Panthers have only been sacked 14 times, quarterbacks have this season, they have thrown a lot of interceptions. They've thrown 9 INTs between, obviously, Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, that comes in for 31st right now in the National Football League, get takeaways. So when you disrupt the quarterback, you have the opportunity to disrupt the flow of the offense. That's where you need to come in and create more turnovers, more takeaways, the way that the Broncos have done so already this season. That's going to be a big key. And I think our final key to victory here that we're going to wrap things up on today's show, plain and simple, take care of business. You are 9.5-point favorites against this team. Sean doesn't care about what the line is or anything like that. He doesn't care that they're favorites. He wants them to focus on doing their operational stuff well and beating a team that they should. Can you do that for 2 weeks in a row? That is the hope. And look, I think it would be a little promising too. Like, you take care of business against a team that you're supposed to this week. That tells me that this team has a level of focus and that they can lock in game plan wise to make plays, because next week you have to go take on the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on the road, your first of a 2-game road trip where it's Baltimore, Kansas City, 2 AFC gauntlet matchups right there. And if Denver can take care of business at home, then they can shift their focus to Baltimore, where they're going to have their hands full, probably the biggest test of the season. But you can't get to that without studying for the midterm. And that's where the Broncos are at here as they prepare for the Carolina Panthers. Those are our keys to victory here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. With that said, Broncos Country, appreciate you so much for always tuning in, making us your first listen. We appreciate you so much. We'll be back for the Locked On Broncos post-game report on Sunday following the game. We'll be at the game at the stadium. Once press conferences are done, we'll jet back over here. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we'll sit down, we'll react to it, and hopefully the Broncos take care of business, improve to 5-3, which would be a promising development for them in terms of where expectations were on the season. Broncos Country, we'll see you then.